4 million years ago, the Earth was a place ruled by titans. The air shimmered with heat. The ground vibrated with the footsteps of beasts so powerful that even silence carried fear. Vast savannas stretched endlessly beneath a sky filled with circling vultures, while rivers glistened with the scales of ancient crocodiles waiting in perfect stillness. Lions as large as bears, saber-toothed cats like Meganterion, and packs of prehistoric hyenas dominated this savage land. And then, there were us, fragile, hairless, and unarmed. No spears, no fire, no shelter strong enough to hold back the jaws of a predator. The first hominins were wanderers, small groups of early humans whose survival depended entirely on awareness, courage, and an almost impossible adaptability. Every rustle in the tall grass could mean death. Every nightfall, a reminder that they lived at the mercy of the dark. But somewhere between the fear and the chaos, something extraordinary began. These primitive beings started to think differently. They watched, they learned, they adapted. While predators relied on strength and instinct, humans began to rely on something far more dangerous: intelligence. Close your eyes and imagine standing there. No weapons, no technology, only your mind and the will to survive. Would you have the courage to face a saber-toothed predator with nothing but a stone in your hand? Before we journey further into this primal world, tell me, do you think you would survive in an age where humans were prey? Leave your thoughts in the comments and hit the like button if this opening made you feel the raw pulse of prehistory. It helps us keep bringing these forgotten worlds back to life. 4 million years ago, the African continent was not just a land, it was a crucible, the birthplace of countless species, shaped by the rhythm of drought and abundance, where life evolved under the watchful eyes of predators and the merciless sun. This was the stage upon which humanity first began to emerge. Imagine a landscape that shifted with every season. Towering acacia trees stood as lonely sentinels across golden plains, while herds of antelope and prehistoric elephants, the mighty Anankus, moved like living tides. In the distance, thunder rolled not from the sky, but from the hooves of migrating beasts. Lakes expanded and vanished with the changing climate, leaving behind cracked earth and the fossils of those that failed to adapt. Here, early hominins such as Australopithecus afarensis found themselves caught between two worlds, the trees that once sheltered them and the open savanna that now demanded courage. The forest no longer offered safety. Predators ruled both land and water. Giant hyenas stalked the grasslands, saber-toothed cats hid in the shade, and crocodiles waited patiently in shrinking pools. Every direction spelled danger. Yet, it was in this volatile environment that evolution sharpened its blade. The need to move, to observe, to plan. These pressures began to mold the first traits that would define humanity. Standing upright allowed these early beings to scan the horizon, to spot threats and opportunities. Their hands, freed from walking, began to grasp, to carry, to shape. Africa was both a paradise and a proving ground, a place where only those capable of adapting could endure. Every sunrise brought a new battle, and every sunset claimed the weak. But for those who survived, the land itself became a teacher, sculpting minds and instincts that would one day conquer the world. No conclusion. Only a slow fade to the next question that drives their evolution. How could they survive among predators built to kill? 4 million years ago, the African plains were not ruled by humans. They were ruled by monsters. Every sound, every shadow, every sudden silence carried the promise of death. This was an age when predators were not merely dangerous, they were titanic. Among the tall grass moved the Meganterion, a saber-toothed assassin with jaws powerful enough to pierce bone. Unlike modern lions, it did not chase, it ambushed. One leap, one strike, and silence followed. Dinophilis, the terrible cat, haunted the forests, its eyes glinting through the dim canopy, preying on both beasts and early hominins. To wander alone was to vanish without a trace. On the plains, ancient hyenas, larger, stronger, and far more ruthless than today's scavengers, hunted in coordinated packs, their laughter echoing across the savannah as a warning. Even the rivers offered no safety. Beneath the murky waters lurked prehistoric crocodiles, their jaws waiting to snap at anything that dared to drink. Every corner of this landscape was claimed by something faster, stronger, and hungrier than man. For early humans, this world was a relentless test of fear and adaptation. Nightfall was the enemy. The smell of blood carried for miles. To survive even a single day required strategy, watching patterns, reading tracks, and learning the predator's behavior long before they struck. The first spark of intelligence was born not from curiosity, but from terror. And in this brutal hierarchy, humans stood at the very bottom. Yet the very predators that sought to destroy them would, unknowingly, shape their evolution, forcing them to think, to plan, and eventually, to rise. The question that lingers in the wind: when your world belongs to killers, what does it take to fight back? Night falls over the ancient savanna, and the air shifts. The warmth of day fades into the chilling silence of predators on the hunt. In the darkness there are no walls, no torches, no weapons, only eyes that glimmer faintly in the fireless void. For early humans, survival was not about dominance, it was about endurance. Every heartbeat was a gamble against extinction. These primitive hominins had no spears to strike from a distance, no fire to keep the beasts away. Their hands, though nimble, were weak against claws and fangs. Their skin tore easily. Their bones broke quickly. Against nature's executioners, saber-toothed cats, giant hyenas, and ancient crocodiles, they were almost defenseless. The only thing between them and death was awareness, and each other. But this weakness forced a different kind of strength. They learned to move silently, to travel in groups, to listen to the rhythm of the wild. They began to sense danger before it arrived, not through power, but through instinct, sharpened by necessity. The rustle of grass, the distant growl, the flick of a bird taking flight, every sound became a signal in a language of survival. Fear became their teacher. Vulnerability became the blueprint for intelligence. When they could not fight, they observed. When they could not kill, they evaded. And when they could not flee, they adapted. Every encounter left a mark, not just in flesh, but in memory. Each close escape taught them how to live another day. Imagine standing there, unarmed, barefoot, surrounded by shadows that breathe. Could you survive even one night in their place? If you were born into this world of monsters, what would you do to make it through the dark? Tell me in the comments below. And if this glimpse into humanity's earliest struggle moved you, leave a like to help us keep uncovering the origins of our courage. In a world where muscle ruled and fangs decided fate, early humans began to wield something invisible: the mind. It started as instinct, a flicker of thought in the face of fear. But over countless generations, that spark grew into strategy. The fragile bodies that once hid in shadows learned to read the land, the wind, and the rhythm of life itself. When predators struck with brute force, humans countered with observation. They watched how lions moved, how crocodiles waited, how herds reacted to danger. Each encounter became a lesson. They began to recognize patterns: footprints in the dust, broken reeds near the Sum riverbank, the silence that always came before a kill. In these lessons they found the power to predict. And prediction meant survival. Cooperation became their greatest weapon. A single hominin was prey, but a group, moving with awareness and shared intent, became something more. They learned to flank, to distract, to warn. Primitive gestures evolved into communication, a system of sounds and signs that turned scattered individuals into early tribes. The bond between them was not built by strength, but by understanding. Slowly, intelligence replaced fear. Stones were not yet tools, but they were symbols of what would come, the first hints that thought could shape the world. Each idea, no matter how small, carved a path toward the dawn of ingenuity. In the wild theater of Africa, where death reigned supreme, a new kind of predator was quietly being born, one that hunted not with claws, but with comprehension. And while the beasts of that age still ruled the night, something had begun to shift forever. The question now was no longer if humanity would survive, but how far that intelligence would take them. The African plains of 4 million years ago were a living chessboard. Every move, every sound, every shadow could tip the balance between life and death. Early humans stood in the fragile space between predator and prey, neither dominant nor defeated. They were watchers, learners, ghosts among the grasslands. The savanna was a constant spectacle of power. Herds of antelope thundered across the horizon, pursued by lions with muscles coiled like springs. Crocodiles dragged their victims into the muddy silence of the riverbanks. The cries of dying beasts echoed through the dusk, and early humans listened, not with horror, but with understanding. Each kill revealed the patterns of survival. Each predator taught a lesson about timing, patience, and opportunity. Soon, the first hominins began to follow in the footsteps of hunters, not to attack, but to scavenge. They learned to trail the great carnivores at a distance, waiting for their meals to end and their attention to drift. What remained, the scraps of flesh, the marrow within bones, became the foundation of endurance. They risked everything to feed on what others left behind. It was dangerous, desperate, and brilliant. This was not yet dominance. It was adaptation, a fragile balance where humans began to blur the lines between hunted and hunter. Their courage grew from necessity. Their intelligence sharpened in silence, and slowly the savanna began to feel their presence, not as victims, but as competitors in the eternal cycle of life and death. Every sunrise brought the same question: would they survive another day, or become the next meal in nature's ruthless design? There came a moment when survival was no longer enough. Somewhere in the heart of Africa, amid roaring predators and endless night, the first spark of courage was born. For millions of years, fear had been humanity's cage. But now it became fuel. The early hominins had learned to watch, to hide, to endure. But now they began to fight back. Not with weapons, but with unity, strategy, and defiance. When danger approached, they no longer scattered. They formed circles, shouting, waving branches, throwing stones. Against the darkness, their voices became weapons of sound and defiance. And sometimes, just sometimes, the predators hesitated. Every small act of resistance was a turning point in evolution. To stand one's ground against a beast twice your size was not instinct. It was a choice. The fragile creatures who once fled began to understand that cooperation could challenge even the most fearsome hunter. The birth of courage was not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Around the fires that would one day burn, this courage became legend, though fire itself was still a dream. Every successful defense meant another generation would live to learn, to evolve, to dream of safety. And within those moments of defiance lay the blueprint of everything humanity would become. Soldiers, explorers, inventors, survivors. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine standing before a saber-toothed cat, heart racing, no weapon in hand. Would you run, or would you roar back? Tell me in the comments. Do you think you could face the monsters of our past? And if this glimpse into the origins of human bravery struck you, hit the like button so we can keep uncovering the wild courage that shaped our species. Every inch of the prehistoric landscape was written in blood. The ground itself told stories of hunts, ambushes, escapes, and deaths. For the early humans, every step left a trace. Every struggle carved a mark into the bones that time would one day fossilize. The African plains were not just alive, they were an endless archive of survival. Predators killed to live, prey ran to endure, and humans, fragile, desperate, evolving, hovered somewhere in between. They scavenged what they could, learned where danger slept, and etched invisible maps into their minds. The scent of decay was a signal, the silence of vultures, a warning. To survive here meant to become a part of nature's rhythm, not to resist it. But in this endless cycle of death and rebirth, something profound began to happen. Humanity started to recognize itself within the chaos. They saw patterns, not only in the movement of beasts, but in the very fabric of existence. Life fed on life, and yet, from that brutality, understanding was born. Each generation inherited the wisdom of the last, the memory of places to avoid, the timing of migrations, the signs of a coming storm. The remains they left behind, bones cracked for marrow, footprints hardened in clay, tools shaped by trembling hands, became echoes of a species learning what it meant to survive. Even in the shadow of extinction, there was persistence, adaptation, and the quiet defiance of a creature refusing to disappear. The earth would remember their struggle in stone, and as the dust settled over their bones, the question lingered, could intelligence and unity truly tip the balance against nature's ancient giants? Out of the ashes of struggle, a new kind of being began to emerge. From the lineage of Australopithecus rose the first creatures who could truly be called architects of their own destiny, the early hominids. They were still fragile, still prey, yet their eyes held something different: awareness. A flicker of comprehension that would change the world forever. The landscape had not grown kinder. Predators still ruled, droughts still came, and the nights remained full of unseen terrors. But these beings no longer moved through the wilderness as victims. They moved with purpose. Australopithecus afarensis, and later Homo habilis, began to reshape their environment in small but decisive ways. Stones were not just weapons now. They were tools, extensions of thought. Each strike against a rock was an act of rebellion against nature's tyranny. With hands that crafted and minds that planned, the early hominins started to harvest the rewards of ingenuity. They cracked open bones for marrow, built primitive shelters, and shared food within their groups. Communication deepened, not yet language, but something close. The beginnings of culture, of knowledge, passed from one mind to another. Slowly, evolution began to accelerate. Their brains expanded, their movements grew deliberate, and their understanding of the natural world became strategic. The first sparks of invention were forming, though fire itself remained a distant dream. Still, they had taken the first irreversible step. They were no longer mere survivors, they were thinkers. And as they gazed across the savannas that had once terrified them, these early humans stood taller, more confident. The predators had not vanished, but something had shifted. The balance of power was beginning to tremble. The age of fear was ending. The age of humanity was about to begin. The world was changing, and with it, so was humanity. The savannas that once echoed with the roars of predators now carried a different sound, the rhythm of thought, the quiet pulse of invention. From trembling hands came the first tools that shaped destiny, and from fragile minds came the first sparks of imagination. Evolution was no longer a slow drift. It was acceleration. The early Homo habilis stood as the bridge between beast and thinker. Each decision, each adaptation, carried them further from the instinct-driven existence of their ancestors. They began to plan for tomorrow, to anticipate hunger, to prepare for threats, to choose when and where to act. It was the dawn of foresight, the invisible fire that burned long before flame itself. When they picked up stones to craft new shapes, they were not just surviving, they were creating. Their tools cut, scraped, and split, but their true weapon was their vision. They began to see the world not only as it was, but as it could be, a place to be altered, controlled, understood. The earth, once their enemy, was slowly becoming their canvas. And then, somewhere along this path, came the most transformative power of all: fire. To tame the element that once terrified them was to rewrite the rules of life. Fire was warmth, protection, creation. It turned night into safety and fear into mastery. The same creatures that once trembled before the dark now commanded it. Humanity had stepped out of the shadows of predators and into the light of its own making. The fragile survivors of 4 million years ago had become architects of the future, heirs to a legacy written in instinct, struggle, and courage. And so the story continues, from blood to brilliance, from fear to fire. The question now is no longer how we survived, but what we chose to become. If this journey through time awakened something in you, a sense of wonder for where we came from, share your thoughts below and leave a like to keep exploring the forgotten ages that built us.